It's Spoilerin time, ladies and gentlemen. On today's Spoilerin time, we are going to spoil Fargo, episode 9 of season 2, the penultimate episode of season 2. Transparent, the first episode of season 2. And we're going to talk the movie draft, Brian, because we're clearing our schedules in front of Star Wars The Force Awakens.
Heck yes, sir. I love that phrase for the 100th time. I'm Brian Brushwood. That's amazing. We only get to say it this one episode.
I know, right? It's actually pretty. I don't feel like we undersold it on Cordkillers, but getting to like dive in and say it's a 100th episode again, that's amazing.
Pretty great. Not as great, however, as diving into the winter movie draft.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times for the last two movies in the movie draft. In the Heart of the Sea, which I think might have been limited release, so it may not be quite as bad as it looks. I don't know. It only made $11 million for Christy Cates, who spent $15 on it. But Krampus, the $2 wonder, kept generating. It's up to $28 million now. Number 2 on the buy chart.
That's amazing to me, and I believe it has a decent chance to overtake number 1. Let's see, you got $15 million per point spent on Goosebumps. Krampus is at 14.2.
It just needs to make another million, and it gets it.
Dude, I think Justin's going to have the buy of the game. That's what happens when you spend exactly $2 on a niche horror movie that makes a few bucks. That's great.
I guess 2 million. It needs to make 2 million because divided by 2. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Good Dinosaur up to 89 million. So it's actually starting to look respectable on the balance sheet.
It's really not. You got to realize there's not been outside of this. I believe this is the first Pixar movie not to break $200 million.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just saying like it finally doesn't look like a total loss. I say more respectable, I mean more respectable than like, wow, it made nothing. Now it's at least getting close to 100 million, but you're right. That's pretty sad.
But I mean, in the realm of Pixar, it is not just the worst ever. It is by 50% the worst of all of them. I mean, it's astonishing at this point. But whatever. Maybe it'll make all the money in toys.
So what's coming out this week is Sisters, my movie, with Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. Been a lot of buzz around it. They've been doing interviews, had a funny trailer, and then your movie's coming out.
My little flick. It's something you might have heard from William Shakespeare called The Phantom Menace. This is it. Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens.
You just can't stop saying it now.
No, it's happening. Keep in mind that I only get 75% of the gross on this, and it has to be in order to win. Now here's the thing, Tom. You only have Sisters and Daddy's Home from this point, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So you're at 462. You're the front runner. I don't see anybody else touching you, regardless of what they have left in their roster. It seems like you're going to – what do you think your end number is going to end up being, give or take?
Let's call 150 million more. I might get a little bit out of the night before because it's a holiday movie. And so you throw that with Sisters and Daddy's Home. I think it could stretch it between 100 and 150. So
yeah, I
think most optimistic, I would say, is I would finish with like 600 million.
I think 550 or under is a little more likely myself, but keep in mind I have an interest in saying that. But in order for me to beat your 550, that means Star Wars by itself has to be upwards of 700 million come February 12th. That's the ending,
which it could get.
Theoretically, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? But we're going to do a special edition Cordkillers where we're going to spoil the hell out of this. But here's another vector that we hadn't considered this. Shall we move on to our triage segment? Take a few letters?
Yeah, real quickly, though, folks, if you want to know about Star Wars The Force Awakens, we are going to record an early Cordkillers and an early Spoilerin time. The Spoilerin time will be devoted to talking about Star Wars The Force Awakens. We'll record on Friday in the Current Geek slot. Current Geek will move to Monday because we want to do a Star Wars episode for that, but Scott won't have seen it by Friday night. So we will be all about Star Wars The Force Awakens on Spoilerin time next week. Brian, are we going to do Fargo? The season finale next Friday? Do you think you'll watch it by then?
Yeah, no, I'm probably gonna watch it tonight. Okay, to be honest. Yeah.
All right, so we'll figure out. We'll get you your Fargo spoiler in time, but we will mostly concentrate on Star Wars: The Force Awakens.
Star Wars and Fargo coming up in only 5 days. But meanwhile, we got an email from Ed who says, from Timothy who says, Brian said that if he wins, with Star Wars, the Chat Realm movie list would change to all Star Wars, but that's not true. He points out that the top of the Chat Realm movie list is already over 600 plus $1 million, which means Star Wars would have to do quite a bit more to make it into to the top in the same 45 days, probably well over 850 million. So if you think about it this way, in our game, this bet of 75% of Star Wars beating you guys makes sense. But in the Chat Realm League, all of a sudden I feel like everybody in the Chat Realm League who went for the Star Wars is a sucker because you had the chance to find all of the best buys. And in other words, the Chat Realm League always makes much more money, like 50% more money than the 6 players at any given time.
I mean, it is still possible for Star Wars The Force Awakens to do an 850 million plus in the weeks available, which case you'll win handily, obviously. And is it still possible for us to have like that 100-way tie at the top? But this is a really good point that it is going to be much less likely. The likelihood goes way down for that to happen.
Which all of a sudden makes me want to take a look again at our likely champions right now. Right now, and I don't know how this happens. The Chat Realm League, there's always just one winner. Right now, it's Comp Tech Geek with $717 million. There's no way Star Wars is going to beat that.
Does he have anything left, or is that his?
He's got Krampus. Krampus is going to continue to make money. Yeah,
Peanuts movie might make a few more dollars before the holiday season is over.
Also, that hot gem and the holograms take.
Wow, I don't. Oh, wow.
It's not going. Star Wars.
What's the math on that?
I mean, I'm not saying he's going to be the winner, but I am going to say that it's not going to be Star Wars because there's no way that means that Star Wars would do $1 billion domestic.
$956 million.
Yeah, $1 billion domestic by February 12th.
CompTech Geek. I mean, Clembot might catch him, but I think CompTech Geek is not going to be caught by Star Wars.
Yeah, I agree. Great point. Thanks for pointing that out to us. I didn't really think about that, and I'm surprised it took us this long to realize it. Shall we move on to a little bit of spoilage, sir?
Well, we got a little triage spoilage to start you off with, a little aperitif of spoilage from Ed Mitchell, who said, since you finished talking about Leftovers Season 2 on its Spoilerin time, and HBO just announced Leftovers has been renewed for its 3rd and final season, I was wondering where you think the show can go next. Are they going to stay in Jarden? By the way, my show tracker recommendation side reel from my email last week also tells me when shows that I track are renewed or canceled, and that's how I found out about Leftovers. Nifty side reel. Nicely done.
I got to tell you, if this was an ongoing series, I would want them to stay in Jarden. That's all I would want to watch. I want to see more of the Jarden story, and it becomes 7th season of the crazy adventures in Jarden. But knowing that this will be a 3rd and final season, I don't know if it'll look contrived to go somewhere else. I don't know if it would look lopsided to have 2 out of 3 seasons in Jarden. So I honestly don't know. But at this point, I'm so invested in the characters. Unlike the other stuff, we have a terrible time remembering people's names. But Kevin and Lori and all of our characters, they're the real people to me. This is a character-driven show, and I really don't care what the backdrop is or even their situations going forward.
I wasn't sure I was going to like the venue change when they said, "Oh, we're going to a small town in Texas." I'm like, "Oh, okay, we're just because we had lackluster plots, we're just going to put lackluster plots in a new location and that fixes it." Thankfully, that is not what they did. They created a whole town that was compelling and interesting, filled with awesome characters, and so I'm like you, a little bit timid about the idea of them leaving that. But I also like the symmetry of going to a 3rd location. Or what about this? What if they went to multiple locations? What if we saw some things happening in the wreck of Jarden? We saw some things happening in New York, which we actually got a couple of scenes up there this time.
Yeah.
And then we saw maybe Australia. Or maybe Peru, was it, where the scientist was from?
That's interesting.
Yeah. Just things that they had been teasing.
I mean, that's
previously.
the great thing. Even though this allegedly all took place in a small town in Jarden, the fact that we got, especially with like the fantasy elements, the whole crazy post-life hotel and all that stuff. There are so many amazing set pieces that were not set in that small town Texas. You know what? It doesn't matter. I'm up for whatever, much like a certain beer commercial.
I am looking for what's up. Let's start talking about Transparent. We both watched finally the entire first episode of season 2, which begins with a wedding scene, which if you've ever been at a wedding, is taken from the pages of Life. It's a photographer trying to organize people to get the picture taken. And it is, I don't know about you, Brian, but I was like, yes, that is hilariously true.
That's always been the strength of this show, though, hasn't it? Those small personal, even right down to the opening credit sequence where it's like, oh, I know that kid, that expressing himself, the only kid on the dance floor and so on. It's so wonderful. Love everything about this series. Especially, I was trying to put my finger on what made it so poignant and so believable. And I think a big part of it, and I would love to know the behind the scenes on the legal side of things, what they think about when it comes to mentioning brand names. I love the fact that they explained why somebody was here, and it's because they were Facebook friends because they played Bejeweled Blitz. And then somebody was like, what does that even mean? And you're like, oh, well, it's like this thing. And they explain, but they spent like 20 seconds explaining Bejeweled Blitz just to get
Which,
you in.
Which, again, so true.
Yes,
how many times have you had that conversation with a relative or someone who's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
And you find yourself explaining that, and then in the middle of the wedding, her getting distracted, looking up and seeing a banner for WeBuyUglyHouses.com. Again, a very specific, real brand name being called out there, and it's like those are the weird things you obsess about in those moments. I remember going to a family member's funeral. And the cemetery happened to be next to a ranch. And in the middle of reading, this eulogy, a literal jackass starts hee-hawing in the middle of it. And I'm trying not to laugh. And I was like, it's got to stop or I'm going to bust. And it's just so real, so believable, so in the moment. And I don't know if it's the directing or the acting or the writing, but there's something magical about this show. And I love the fact that it's evolving beyond the Mora's transition. It's great.
Well, that first scene, particularly the photography scene, that was one take. I mean, I don't know how many times they went through that take. They may have done several takes. That was one long take. There was no edit in there. So that was just all done improv style. And they got one that was gold. Like, it was true.
Absolutely.
And so it's writing, because the writing set up that scene. It's acting, because those actors had to make that scene work. Improv. There's no way you script every little bit of that out. And it's directing to set up and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. This is the direction you guys go. Make it happen. I mean, it's just brilliant. And a story about a bride who's having doubts on her day is old as the hills. They tweak it a little bit because it's a same-sex couple, right? But that's not enough to really make it revolutionary. What makes it revolutionary is that it's set in this very real scene where people are more obsessed with themselves in some cases than the bride. And the resolution not being just tell her the truth, the resolution being, well, you're not really married because I haven't sent the license in. I mean, it's brilliant.
Yeah, I also like the fact that, and I'm sure this is a little bit too on the nose, but, the fact that they clearly set up, here are some arcs for this season as the camera pans through a menagerie of hotel rooms. You see, the youngest kid, or I forget the names, whatever. The boy, the son saying, like, hey, man, I really am committed to you, rabbi lady that I love and knocked up. And then you see in what to me was the most tender is this moment of sweetness between Mora and his ex-wife. And she very sweetly kisses him on the lips and says, you look beautiful. You should know this. There's something so beautiful about that I absolutely loved. And then it, passes on through, and you've got, our newlyweds having their difficulties. There was a weird
having what was probably the resolution of the entire plot arc happen without audio. Like, she's telling her right then.
Yeah.
That's
I think they real quick says like you see her saying, I'm sorry, I just can't do it. And I don't know if she means the marriage or consummate, have the wedding night or whatever. But the last moment was the weird one, because we have the youngest daughter who, we saw her dabble in S&M early on last season, but like she's out, walking around, looking out in her undies. And then all of a sudden there's just a random person in a red dress there for a split second at the
Yeah,
end?
she's a person from the weird flashback to Berlin 1933, where they're playing Hava Nagila in Berlin and people are dancing around kind of sexily dressed. That is the only part of the episode has not made sense for me yet, and maybe it will be revealed in a future episode. But that it was a weird flashback.
Well,
to be like, oh, this is that same song being played in out of context in 1933 Berlin, pre-Nazi era. And then you see a woman from that flashback on the balcony with her.
yeah. Well, in that case, it makes me feel like a disjointed, out of place element from what feels like a different story being involved in what otherwise is a consistent narrative is as good a segue as any for us to move into talking about the latest episode of Fargo.
Yeah. So I first experienced this episode of Fargo while I was at YouTube Space LA watching some music, and Brian started texting me that it was the greatest episode ever made, and then suddenly was texting me poop emojis. How did this transition happen, Brian?
Hang on. I'm gonna do my best. I hope it's not a. With your permission, sir, I'm going to call up the actual exchange, and what I wrote to Tom was. Let's see. Okay, here we go. I have to go back because we had another conversation in the middle of it. Holy S word. This is the last, this last episode of Fargo. And you're like, yeah, damn, need to watch. Can't wait. And I write 2/3 through. This is extraordinary. You could watch it without seeing a single other episode. And then at some indeterminate time in between, I take it back. The shit is dumb. Dumb. Dumbest shit on the planet. F this show. Why would they do this? Effing nonsense. And then Tom says, whoa. And I text him like 12 poop emojis. And then I write, I'm trying not to ruin it for you. I'll stop talking.
So meanwhile, I'm like walking around with my nephew in town with his new fiance, like trying to keep up with this conversation. And at first I'm like, oh, great. I can't wait to go back and watch Fargo. Then I'm like, oh, crap. Literally, something happened. So it was it's spoiler time. We're just going to jump to there was a big UFO showed up over the hotel where a huge shootout is happening that caused the poop emoji explosion of 2015.
Yeah, by the way, Balloon Knot says it's just a flying saucer, Schwood, which is exactly what what's her name says to her husband.
Right.
You're like, it's just a flying saucer, Ed. Let's go.
Well, and when I watched it, I was watching this episode. I'm like, this is a really good episode. You know, I'm getting it. I'm wondering when the shoe drops, and then of course the UFO shows up, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's. The episode 1, I'm like, oh, it's lights in the sky. And that was true. And people got all excited about lights in the sky. I thought they were other things. This one is definitely a UFO. There is no doubt about it. And the only thing I could say to Brian afterwards is, well, if you took that out, it doesn't affect the story, thankfully. Like it didn't actually change much other than provided a moment of distraction for Solverson, which you could have had another moment of distraction happen. But it is not material. Aliens didn't land. They didn't intervene in the story in any way, and it just flies away. But it is really out of context.
Well, here's its difficulty in reaching me, because I think you could have kept the same plot point in there and at the same places and kept me on board. You could have, number one, like when the first Gearhart died, show the lights, but make it just a little bit ambiguous. Is this him seeing heaven? Is this him, looking at a helicopter, not recognizing what it is? Instead they did like specific lens flare, and I thought it was just a poorly executed version of that at the time. But again, it was like, well, I got past it. Clearly I loved the show moving forward. In this regard, you could have done the same thing. You could have had ambiguity. You're like, what is this light? What does this mean? Is this the cops? It feels like an alien. Certainly, everyone who walks away is going to say it was an alien. Is it a military craft? I don't know. But instead, they removed all ambiguity, and they full-on did not the best CG UFO I've ever seen. It looked like it belonged in the Golden Retriever epic Space Buddies. It's 1979 era
UFO graphics.
Well, no, it's not though, because I think I would have dug that. Like if they had done it with film effects, with like to make it look like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that would be great. But it had the stink of CG all over it. It felt cheap cable television, digital effects, and I think that's what took me so out, and it was so unnecessary. You could have done so many other things. I understand if you wanted to prove a point, if you wanted to get somewhere, I would have swallowed that bitter pill. But knowing that we're up against the last episode, am pretty sure I just ate a lump of coal for no good reason.
Well, and I think that's what bothers me about it is they, like you say, they could have just had lights in the sky that were unexplained again. And it could have caused a distraction, and you could have implied, was it UFOs? Because the idea of putting UFOs in the storyline in 1979 could be genius, right?
Sure.
This is the era of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, frankly, being as popular as Star Wars at the moment it came out. It didn't have the long-lasting effect that Star Wars had, but I remember, like, I had the Star Wars comic book and the Close Encounters photo novel.
Yep.
Like they were equal in my mind as far as like, these are awesome things, right? They just didn't do the merchandising with Close Encounters well, I guess. I don't know. So it's period appropriate. Like people were fascinated with UFOs. It was a big deal back then. Project Blue Book was on TV. I don't mind them working it in. I don't get them working it in that way where it's entirely unbelievable in a true story. There were two ways they could have taken it out, right? They could have said, okay, we're not going to allow anyone to see it for sure. We're going to have doubts, like you say, with the lens flare, or put it in with bad CG and just have no one acknowledge it. Could have been the second best way to do it. But then they made a point of having Kirsten Dunst say, it's just a flying saucer, Ed. In case you, the audience, were doubting whether we all saw it or not, I'm going to make it very clear that the characters in this story see the UFO.
I kind of admired that because I feel like she was talking to the audience at that point. I felt like she was speaking to me specifically, like, it's like, quit being a baby. It's just a UFO, Brian. It's like, in that regard, I can almost go along with it. But regardless, I think it was wholly unnecessary, and I want to express how much I love this. Like, I find myself say, if I'm going to recommend someone watch this season, I'm going to full on spoil. I'm going to say in 2 episodes, you're going to see a dumb part about a UFO. Scrub that even as it happens from your mind because it affects no plot points. Go forth and enjoy. Like,
yeah,
just
I wouldn't
watch.
bother saying it to anybody personally. Because I still thoroughly enjoyed the episode.
It was great.
I thought it was a fantastic build-up. OK Corral Western shootout at the end. Everybody, it's a Hamlet. Like pretty much everybody's dying. We're not even sure if Sam from Cheers is dead or not, but he is not looking good at the end of this.
Yeah, dude. His character and his spider sense tingling, going off and feeling like he's got to jump up. Real quick, remind me: is Solverson is he benched at this point still, or he runs across?
Well, during this episode, he gets kicked out by the guys who are like, "We don't want to listen to you."
Right,
they
drive him to the state line.
He gets escorted to the state line, but then he sneaks back because he sees what's going on with Milligan, and he basically runs up into the motel, right, and gets caught in the shootout and is able to call for help for his wife's father,
for his father-in-law.
Which, by the way, that is a devastating part of this that I'd forgotten about till just now. That we see her collapse. And that phone rings when he calls, all excited before all of the shootout, right?
Yeah.
He calls happy to talk to her, and she's not there. And it's just nightmarish.
I mean, what a strange artifact. I'm sure it's, for the millennials out there, they're all like, I don't get it. Why don't you just called and then they just weren't there and you just didn't talk?
I imagine there are plenty of millennials who understand that cell phones didn't exist.
No, they're savages, Tom. They don't understand anything. They think that things have always been this way.
It is weird to be like, oh yeah, there is no other way for him to get a hold of her.
Yeah.
If she doesn't pick up this phone, he doesn't know where she is. Then, he just assumes maybe she's out in the backyard or something, right?
That moment when Solverson leaves and says to Ted Danson, like, dinner Sunday, like, it's so powerful because on the one hand, it's like, yeah, man, tell him to keep kicking, tell him that, give him something to stick around for. On the other hand, it's heartbreaking because it's like, It's a good chance he's dead, and that's the last thing he said to him, you know?
Dinner. Well, and also, it's a good chance his wife's dead. So even if Ted Danson's character survives, there ain't gonna be no dinner Sunday, and Solverson doesn't even know that.
I gotta tell you, this episode did not end with a bow on it, right? They still had unresolved things, and yet it was such a journey, and it felt like such the end of so many things, or close enough to the end, that I was weirded out when after the credits, because I sat through the entire credits, they started playing a teaser for next week. And I'm like, why are they playing a teaser for Fargo? I just watched the last episode.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait, there's one more? I'm like, what's left to do? And then, you know, and of course the answer is it's Ed and his wife on the run, and you know what they're going to do from here. But at this point, it's sort of a bit like a bit of Game of Thrones syndrome, where it's like, you know, I'm sure they'll give me something, but I don't know what I'm craving at this point. You know, I feel like we saw the Gearharts gutted. I think we saw Mike Milligan get out scot-free, where he can tell whatever story he wants about what happened. I think we saw the hubris of the South Dakota police come back to bite him in
did
the
Milligan
butt.
get out scot-free though? Because his chip was to bring in Gerhardt, and he doesn't have that chip anymore.
Well, he can report that he can tell whatever story he wants at this point about his involvement in what happened, about what he did for X, Y, and Z. All that matters is, like, you know,
The Gerhardts are all dead. So
that's right. The story he tells is,
but I think
that
I want to see that. I want to see him try to sell that story and see if it sticks. I want to see what happened to Solverson's wife. Like, there are definitely things that I want to see in this next episode that I would have felt a little, not cheated, but a little bit hungry. This could have been a season ender if I knew we were going back to this timeline next season. But it's knowing we're going somewhere else. I need a few more. I need a few more actions to take place.
I mean, I will probably change my tune on Friday after we've seen it, but I don't know that I'm craving it, that I have that hunger in me. Like, I feel pretty full. I feel like I got 90% of it, which is, you know, convenient.
That's about
considering
right. Yeah.
It's but I mean, like, I feel like I got the vast majority of the story I wanted out of this, and I don't
what
know
I'm
what's left.
feeling is a Mike Milligan spinoff series, please.
Oh, dude, Mike Milligan becomes a librarian.
Just
I would
like
watch
Kung
that.
Fu Fighter. Mike
He didn't
Milligan
even
walks
have
the
to
earth.
kill anyone. He could loan library books to 12-year-olds and speak the Jabberwocky to them, and I'd be like, yes, let's watch all that.
Mike Milligan, English teacher.
Yes, he takes a bunch of despondent 14-year-olds and teaches them to care about the English language.
About Lewis Carroll. Hey, J.C. Calhoun pointed out there's a Wikipedia article about something called the Val Johnson incident from Marshall County, Minnesota, where Deputy Sheriff Val Johnson had a run-in with a UFO in 1979.
I don't care. I don't care.
Okay. I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm just saying they are trying to make an allusion to something that happened in Minnesota in 1979, which I didn't know.
I guess I just assumed that because, again, I mean, UFO fever certainly had us all gripped in the late 70s, right? We were all, I mean, I remember watching all those UFO programs in the early 80s and loving all that stuff. But I don't know that fixes anything for me. You know, it's like there's also, you know, if Sasquatch showed up, would that have been any better? You know, if Dracula showed up, would that have been any better?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't change it for me, but I find it interesting that, okay, they had a particular Minnesota law enforcement oriented reason behind it. I still think it's faulty, but that I find I didn't know that. So there we go. And Johnson, oh wait, his name is Solverson? No, his name is Johnson. Appeared as a guest on ABC's Good Morning America. So this was like a national thing. I don't know.
Fair enough. I mean, again, I can see why they did. I just wish it took me out of it.
Wish they didn't.
Yeah, exactly. I could see why you did. I just wish you didn't. Title that episode.
And that is going to be it. Again, we have an all-star cast for this Friday's Star Wars Spoilerin Time. Looking at Christy Cates, looking at Andrew Main. There's rumors of Anthony Carboni, Justin Robert Young. Who knows who else is going to show up? We're going to make Jackie Hearn show up. And of course, Brian and I will be here too.
Heck yes.
We'll
It's our
spoil
holiday
you
special.
then.
Entertainment Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.